Warm welcome to our three speakers today. That's Rupert, Kathryn, and Ruth. We're so delighted that you could join us, and thank you very much for the thought and contribution that you're going to make today. We'll invite you each to speak for up to 10 minutes. You don't have to speak for 10 minutes, but up to 10 minutes. And I'll keep time on the process so that you don't need to worry about that. And then at the end of that, we'll have about 25 minutes of conversation and discussion before Mel wraps up at the top of the hour. So our first speaker today is Rupert Roniger, and he is the founder of Light for the World, an organization concerned with disability and much more besides. It began in quite a small way some 25 years ago, and now here we are today, a large, substantial organization with a big staff and a very large covering in many parts of the world. Rupert, why don't you take on from here, and I'll time you in. Welcome, Rupert.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to share with you. It's really a pleasure for me. It's a special moment also today. As Chris said, I'm leading as a CEO Light for the World, which is I have to contradict, we are not a big large organization, we're a relatively small organization, rooted in a couple of European countries, Austria, Czech Republic, Germany, Switzerland, UK, Belgium, and working mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Mozambique, South Sudan, Kenya, Uganda, and in three areas: health, disability inclusive education, and economic empowerment for people with disabilities. And just that you have an idea about the scope, we have roughly 250 team members. Slightly more than half of them are working from Africa, from our country offices. And yeah, it's 26 years ago that I joined this organization. And yeah, where do I stand now, or where do I stand in my succession journey? Yeah, I had never planned to stay that long, but it was always exciting. It was always interesting. I was always passionate about this work. So I stayed on longer than planned. I had from time to time some reflection, analytical and emotional reflection. Is it still good for the organization? Does it serve the purpose of the organization? And this is still okay for me. And as the organization emerged, there were always reasons to stay, due to curiosity and due to it would maybe now be disruptive. But after 26 years, last summer, I came to the conclusion after some discussions with my family that I think it's now time to give space for something new, and also allow or take the risk to get on new grounds as a person. That was last summer. In September, I informed my chair and my deputy chair that it's not an issue for discussion, but that I have decided that I will not stay for reappointment for another 3 years, but that I offer them to be there for up to 1 year to prepare a good transition and handover. This was last September. So then in November, the board formally appointed a working group of 5 board members to lead my recruitment. We were also all on the same page that the search for a successor should be definitely led not by myself, and I should not be involved, but it should be the role of our advisory, of our board of trustees. And so the recruitment process was prepared, and early January this year it was kicked off. And yeah, it's a coincidence, but on Friday my chair, Tom Shakespeare, called me and told me we have succeeded in finding a successor that meets the criteria that we have defined together. And she will start in August. And just 2 hours ago, an email went out to all staff members to inform them about this transition. So that's in a nutshell where we stand in this transition process. So I had the past half year to emotionally think through and this process and digest the whole everything that is connected with that. And yeah, I feel now quite positive, but a bit excited because there's some uncertainty about it. The question in the invitation was, what can we pass on from our experiences, and what do you need the successor to bring? My first answer to that would be, well, I don't think that I can pass on a lot to my successor. So my intention at this point of time is really to let go. I see for myself as a person a bit the analogy to my family situation. I have 3.5 kids and they are grown up now. The last one moved out in September. And I think if I were now asked, what can I pass on in experiences to my 20-year-old son? I would say, well, that would be too late now. I think that I have passed on a lot to my son, hopefully, in the last 20 years. But now it's over. He might come and ask me for advice. And if he asks me twice, then I would go for an answer. And my intention, at least now, is to keep that similar to our organization and to my successor. So my intention is that I take time and I will be there in the transition phase to share everything I know and every experiences that I gained to my successor. But when my successor is in charge and takes over, I stop, and I will not intend to hand over my experiences, because I hope that some of the positive things that I hope that I brought to the organization are in the organization already. So they will be past my passion, my experience, my empathy, hopefully is already in the organization. So it doesn't need me to hand it over. So that's at least my intention. Of course, there are also many emotions involved. Also, it was a very interesting journey to experience the reaction of others. These reactions were quite different. When I shared with them, I shared it on LinkedIn and I sent, I think, emails to probably 300 people, sharing with them that I'm embarking on a journey, and in the course of 2022, I will leave Light for the World. There were some people who said, great, that's really courageous, and it's great that you take this initiative in time, and I'm sure that will continue in a positive manner. But there were also people who said, how can you dare do that? This is your baby and you brought it up, and I don't understand that, and what's really the intention behind. Maybe you have been fired and you don't dare to admit, or maybe, I don't know, you are worn out, you're stressed due to COVID, and you're about to break down, or you're sick. And also some of my dear team members who have been working for many years are sending from time to time messages, and oh, I'm so sad, and I have my doubts that this will be a good way forward without you. You are really the heart of the organization, so I need to repeat them again. No, I'm very confident, I'm smiling, I'm fine. So this is my intention at this rather early stage of the transition. And maybe I'm also happy to stop here and wait for some comments and questions.
Sure, absolutely, Rupert. Well, thank you very much for starting us off in such a brilliant way, and how wonderful for us as a group of people, as participants in this, to be here on the very day that you issued your resignation, as it were, to the staff. That you really do privilege us with this particular result, which is lovely. I'll invite all our participants to ask questions and to be involved with Rupert and Kath and Ruth at the end of the presentations. And of course, if you've got any thoughts or chat or questions, do put them in the chat. Caitlin is watching out, and so we can catch them as we go as well. so that we can do it both ways round. Rupert, many thanks indeed. And Kathryn, if you're ready, we'll come to you. Are you happy for us to introduce you and to get going?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's great. Well, Kath, Kath, you've got a wonderful career behind you, and I wanted to focus just in terms of the organization you left with, of course, is the Birthing Right Project USA. But of course, that isn't the only organization you're associated with or have been associated with, including, of course, being an honorary ambassador for a very distinguished organization. So you might like to fill us in a little bit before you get to the main point. But anyway, Kat, it's so lovely to have you with us. And I should say, for participants, there are a number of people on the webinar today, including Agnes, for example, from Hungary. But Agnes and Kat and Mel and others were all at the original meeting in Aix-en-Provence when we founded the Elders. So it's not really a case of welcome, it's just a case of, hello, you've come back. And so we're delighted you're with us, Kat, and do please give us your thoughts.
Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening. And I'm really happy to be here. And I'm really happy to be here because the Elders Council played such an important part in my getting to this moment. It was kind of like being in high school, but then getting in the senior class and looking around and seeing all the people who were also graduating and what we were going to do with the next part of our lives, but to talk about all of that stuff that led up to being seniors in the senior class and graduating. So that was the first time in a long time at that very first meeting that I had a chance to just hang out, have fun, to be honest and authentic and talk about how difficult the work had been, why I'd done the work with my peers and colleagues. Because sometimes when you run an organization, you don't really have your peers in the organization. That's not necessarily who you're working with. So the Elders Council was really important to me in terms of really beginning to think not just about the organization, but think about myself. They almost had to beat me to accept the part at the end about investing in myself and investing in my own wellness, because the work that I had done was so much a part of me, I couldn't even pull it apart. But that was the first time, because of that commitment, for me to think that I am not the Birthing Project. The Birthing Project was actually born 34 years ago, and I'm kind of considered the mother of Black maternal and child health in the United States. And so that was more than an organization. It was more than a mission. It was something that I had been doing all my life. And even before then, I was just one of those people that was born into the civil rights movement and had a grandfather who was 6 years old when he was freed from slavery. And so the idea of actually making social change in the United States was not trying to come up with a corporate organization. That wasn't working for me. The other thing that's been really important for me has been being an ambassador for FIRE, which is the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, because my role in FIRE is to be the community elder, to be the Queen Mother. And being the Queen Mother doesn't mean you are in charge and you're the head queen. It means that you pray for, nurture, and encourage the now generation of leaders, the kings and queens. They're the ones, that generation, who's running things. And my job is, I love it. And it has helped me to understand more clearly what my role is with my own organization. Because we are global, we're in about 13 countries, and I feel I am definitely, have Yemaya on my head. I'm the mother of all the mothers. And so that role of taking care and nurturing other people is something that's really, really built into our organization. So when I think about what I could actually pass on, it's not necessarily how you do what you do, but it's not what you do, but how you do it. It's that sense of sisterhood, that sense of family, that sense of community, and it's that sense of reclaiming global citizenship. And that always there is continuous change. And that is the one thing that is constant, is the continuous change. I'll just say for one moment, the person who is my successor, her name is Brandy. And I met Brandy at a coffee shop on a day when I was saying, at the end of this year, I think I'm actually just going to close the birthing project. We've been around for over 30 years. I think I look at all the things that are going on in maternal and child health. I don't have to be the expert in any of these things. All I did was just kind of lit the fire. You know, Miss Harriet Tubman, it's like, oh, we're in a really bad place and we have to get to Canada. I'm not even sure that a place called Canada really exists, but I'm getting the hell up out of here. We can no longer afford to continue to have our moms and babies die in childbirth. And Brandy said to me, I think it's still relevant and I would like to do it. And I said, well, have at it. I did not even know Brandy. We did not go through a process to find a person to hire me, to hire to replace me or whatever. And Brandy was our legacy fellow for 3 years. And her whole job was just to figure out what the birthing project was doing all over the world and how that fit into what she was interested in doing. And it's just really important to me that what Brandy brings to the job is that she brings a sense of vision, which is different than imagination, and that she really is willing to accept her intuitiveness, that she has a sense of adventure, that she's courageous, that she's audacious, and that she has a sense of inclusion. And the way that I think that I feel comfortable that we're maintaining the culture and mission of the organization is, first of all, is that it keeps changing. So maintaining it is not really a good word for us. It's like, what is it today when it was different? Because today is different than yesterday or 10 years ago. So it's continually defining what we should be doing and who we're doing it with, which determines the culture. To continually assess, you know, the things that were important to us 34 years ago when we got started are not that important anymore. You know, my protege was Time Woman of the Year on the cover. So, you know, it's like she has taken this thing of, hey, girl, you look a lot like me, but you're stronger and smarter than I've ever be, to another whole level that I could not have imagined. But I knew that there was something out there that was more than where we were at that point. And then we have to keep reframing things and we keep adapting. Thank God for young people. If I had to learn technology, the Underground Railroad would have stopped probably in Mississippi because I couldn't have figured out how to use the technology to get to the next place. But then there's that balance because people do not like only technology. And so one of the things that the young people in our organization are finding is, well, you probably shouldn't be introducing yourself by email. You know, you probably need to figure out how to have some contact with the person. You probably need to make sure that that person feels that you are a part of this organization because the organization defines itself as a family. So I'm feeling pretty good right now. And I think that I'm really at peace because I've really understood not exactly what the organization is, but who I am in the process. And every step that I've taken in that organization, now that I could think about it, really wasn't about the organization. It was about healing my own personal pain. It was about finding my own self. It was about finding a place for me in the world. And when all is said and done, I love being a cheerleader. You know, my tag is one proud mama cat. I am so pleased at the young people that are taking the torch and taking it further than I can imagine. And I'm so happy to have peers and colleagues that I can talk to and feel like, you know what, look at what we've done. So that's my report this morning.
Thank you. That's brilliant. That's really great. Thank you, Kat. Beautiful. And I'm really struck by the way in which both Rupert and yourself, Kat, have both talked about the importance of the emotional journey, which of course is so significant in this. We're going to turn to Ruth now, and then we're all going to jump in with questions and comments and discussions. There are a number of people on this screen today who have been through the process of leaving their organizations one way or the other. Just want to give a quick welcome to Maria Foscarinis. Maria, you're very welcome in this group. Thank you for coming. And also to Douglas Samuel. So it'd be good to have you all here after Ruth has spoken, and maybe with wherever the broadband is possible with your videos on. That would be very helpful. Ruth, you're most welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And you are now in the middle of creating a new organization, ReKindle, which is going to be a school for kids who have great leadership and who are going to be able to find their way through this new school, which is starting this year, I believe.
Tomorrow, Chris.
Tomorrow, my God, we've really positioned this so beautifully with the three of you.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. The gods are shining on us. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. So we've got all these wonderful things occurring to our speakers, almost as it were, as they speak. So that's incredible. But it may be that you would like to talk to us a little bit about your whole experience, Ruth, and also your departure from the organization you created before, which was called Reclaim. So over to you for 10 minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ruth. I'm in Manchester. I've listened to the two previous speakers and kind of wish that you'd flip the order, Chris. Like, I ended on such a positive high, and now I'm going to be like, and then the other side of the story. So yeah, I learned a lot from you both. So thank you very much. And I may have started several organizations, but I'm still learning about the whole successful succession. So I'm going to share some of that with you now. And I think when I was invited to speak here, I think Chris's email said that your talks quite often have a song, and it's going to be Jimmy Cliff. I don't know if you're going to play that later, but I was just reflecting on the fact that I saw Jimmy Cliff, who was one of my favourite artists, in 2015 in Manchester when he was 70 years old, and he did the Splits. And it just felt like a good metaphor for this group somehow, you know, this guy on the stage kind of still bellowing away, and then at the end he ended in the Splits. So it's so much energy that he had. So yeah, my stories, I met Chris many years ago when I became an Ashoka Fellow, and I remember asking him about what he did and what he'd founded, and being quite surprised that there was more than one organization, and frankly feeling like, you know, was he nuts? Like, who would do this more than once? And I find myself a few years down the line now about to start my fourth organization, and I recognize that I'm just a serial founder, and that we're a small type, but a type.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to talk a bit about that. So the organization I want to share is an organization I started in 2007 called Reclaim. And as Kat was saying, you know, I was so emotionally invested in this organization because this organization was basically something that I lived and breathed before it ever became an organization. And it was all about how do we find young people from marginalized communities and give them the confidence and the courage to step through any imposter syndrome, and to have the confidence to step into any space and feel they can own that space and feel that they are worthy. And you know, as with a lot of founders, I started the organization I'd probably needed myself, and I was so invested in it. It was my heart and my soul and my spirit. I ran the organization for 10 or 11 years. I can't remember many holidays. I can't remember much well-being, because everything I got from it that's what kept me going. You know, people used to say you're working ridiculously, but I didn't mind because I was almost messianic in terms of, you know, the mission that I was on. And with that kind of heat and energy, you know, you get a lot of traction. And I suppose looking back now as a slightly wiser older person, I was front, center, back. I was everywhere in the organization, and it was so bound in with me and my personality and my energy and my passion. And there's a lot of positives in that, but there's also the negatives that we probably all know about as well, which is that it's pretty hard to replace that. And it's pretty hard to keep everyone feeling that they're on the same mission and they're not on your mission. And I remember about 8 or 9 years in, we were doing really well, winning lots of awards and this and that and da-da-da. And we had a training day about our values of the organisation. And we wrote down what the values of the organisation were. And I was always very proud that we were a pioneering, strong, bold organisation. And those words were there, like, you know, written large in gold letters. And then the trainer said, and who's the custodian of the various values? So, you know, we went through, and what basically happened is a team took, you know, accountability and responsibility and all those things, and left pioneering, risk and bold all with me. And I think that was the first point that I had a little red flag and thought, this doesn't feel right. I thought we were a pioneering organisation. I didn't feel we were supporting a pioneer. And so I did lots of activities to try and make everyone feel they were equal parts of the mission. But I actually think with hindsight, that was probably a bit too late. That was probably signaling the kind of the time that I should go. And I think at that point, which is about 7 years in, I started making noises about going. And every time I think there was a lot of panic. You know, I was the person who wrote the funding bit. I was the person who did the talks. I was the person. And every single time the board especially felt, we can't go, it'll be the death of the organisation. And there was a lot of emotion involved, which I now recognise it was fear. Probably my fear of leaving, but definitely people's fear of what happens when she goes, the golden goose. And then I remember another time I was sat with having a conversation with someone, and they said, you know, we're having a normal conversation, and they said, that's all great, but who are you when you're not Reclaim? And there was just this huge silence. And I just sat there like a goldfish, like literally couldn't answer. And I found it really distressing. And I was thinking back to the fact I used to be someone who had all kinds of interests. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to see various parts of the world. I wanted to live in Brazil. And this person said to me, who am I without my charity? And I literally didn't have an answer. And I was 29 years old, single forever, and couldn't define myself beyond my work at all. And my work was called Reclaim, and I'd forgotten to reclaim the key person. I can see Kat smiling at me. I'm wondering if some of this is relevant. And so that was the moment I thought to myself, I've got to reclaim me as well, because this is no good. It's no good being inauthentic to all the young people and encouraging them to think critically about their lives and all the speeches I would give. And then when it come to my own life, I'd forgotten to put the joy and the well-being and all those other things in place. So I set up a meeting with my chair and I prepared for it. And I said, look, I want to do a bit like Rupert said. I don't want to leave anyone in the lurch. I'll give you 6 months. I think I said 8 months, in which place we can start a process to find the right chair. I'm happy to be involved or not be involved, but you know, this is what I want to do. And the response I got was no, just no, you're not going. And it was almost comical, because I was like, no, I'm going. And it was like, but you can't. So this went on and backward and forward and back. And anyway, cut a very long story short, I ended up leaving, but not leaving kind of with the support of the board, who felt I'd let people down, which is quite harsh after 11 years now. And I wasn't, at that point, I think because I recognised that maybe the values of myself and my board were not aligned, I think for the final months, rather than feeling a peaceful transition, I felt an immense sense of panic, because all of a sudden, all those values and all the work I cared about, I recognised I was now out of control, and people who were steering the organisation maybe had a different direction that didn't safeguard the things that I felt were important. Everything I was about how do we put people from those left behind communities in the centre of power. And all of a sudden I'd put myself out, which is fine, but I hadn't done the work to enshrine the values in the organisation. And so all of a sudden the people making decisions about what was going to happen, who didn't have the things that I felt were front and centre. And because I hadn't done the process well, like Rupert, I didn't feel relaxed. I felt very, very anxious, because I thought my organisation is about to become very different. I left the organisation. It was very tumultuous, very, very difficult. within a year, 20 members of staff that had kind of started with me were gone, and new members of staff were brought in. The new CEO who came in, who's actually really good, but it was really interesting because my organisation was all about power outside of London, and a white man from London was brought in to replace me on more money than I was ever on. So it was almost like we were replicating everything that the organisation was set out to not do, and it was a really, really painful process. And I think at the time I was pretty crushed afterwards, because I recognised that I'd got it wrong. I'd spent so long focused on the work that I hadn't safeguarded maybe the principles of the work, and I hadn't spent enough time working on what's going to happen after you, what's going to happen with your succession. So, and I couldn't have even spoken to you about this about a year ago. I would have found this too emotional and too painful. So it does show me, actually, like Chris said, I'm in a very different place now that I can do this. And the reason I wanted to come and talk about this is because I've now recognised, 2 organisations down the line now, that the importance of getting it right and the importance of trusting your own gut and instincts. And I think sometimes, especially those of us that are more kind of activist in nature, I think that sometimes, that kind of spreadsheet that shows kind of impact and strategy, I can almost have too much respect for that and put it above my own gut instincts. And I've learned to trust my gut instincts on things like this a little bit more. And that's not to control it all, but I think that there's some things that in an organisation, it's silly to clutch onto and to hold on to power with some things. We can, the detail of what goes on in our organisations, I'm happy to let that go. But there's some things, until it's right for me, I've got to hold on until I have that coffee with someone who I spark with. I've got to hold on, because otherwise you don't know who you're handing this over to. And for me, there was nothing more heartbreaking than handing it over to the wrong person and having no power to snatch it back. So for me, there's something about holding on to that. I think there's also something about either sometimes leaving earlier than you might have planned, or staying beyond when you might have planned, just to make sure you've got the timing just right. So I should have either gone at 7 years or held on for another year. I think making myself a timetable that worked for me but possibly didn't work for the organisation left things in peril a little bit. I think in terms of what I need for a successor, and I've had this in other organisations since, I just needed, I think, to be listened to a little bit. Just in terms of what was at the core, what was the origin story, where did this thing come from, and to have someone who understood that. Like the CEO who's taken over is a great guy. He's, we've never met, but he's doing a really good job. But there's still part of me that wishes that we'd been able to have coffee or been able to chat about the organisation, because this was literally not literally my baby, but kind of my baby, and just to kind of cast it off without understanding where it was going next, I found really hard. And I know maybe a more emotionally mature person than myself could do it, but I just couldn't do it.
So Ruth, if you'd like to bring us to
yep. Well, that was my final point, Chris. I was just trying to think of something eloquent to end it, and I couldn't think of anything. So just to say thank you to everyone for listening, and I'll be happy to keep the conversation going.
Well, and the beauty is that the organisation you're due starting tomorrow is called ReKindle, which is fantastic. It's got so many different meanings in that word.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, bless you. Thank you very much for that very, very helpful description of the situation in which you found yourself and which you've shared with us, which I think we will find helpful in the process. So we get to a different part of the program now. Thank you to all the speakers. Are there comments or questions that people would like to ask straight away? I know that there are a couple of questions in the chat, which I'll come to. Is there anything that comes to people's minds straight away before we go to questions that have been put in the chat? I know that a number of you on the screen today have been through this process of working with an organization and then leaving it in one way or another. And so there's plenty of experience in the meeting, which would be important also. Molly, did you want to comment? You're on mute at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, I had a very different experience. I was just writing to Rupert to say I loved his the term he chose as founding CEO. But I had been working for 3 years with a group of consultants, and was told that we couldn't continue on with the project we were doing unless I did a CE as an organization. So then I did become the founder. But my different experiences that you all have talked about leaving and letting the new CEO take over, but I'm in a position of transition. 3 years ago, oh no, it's longer now, 4 years ago, after 27 years at our organization, Tostan, and was lucky, as Ruth said, I had that coffee, Ruth, and about values, and it was just so important. I was a very big part of the transition and choosing the person because I felt so strongly. I just so agree with Ruth about, I mean, if you're founding that organization, and Rupert, that's what I was surprised at, that you weren't part of that process. My board made me a huge part of it because of they said, you as the parent, you should have some role in being involved. And I really admire the fact that you were able to step back like that. But at the same time, I agree with Ruth that when you're the founder and it's your, you believe in it so strongly. And it was just wonderful to have that feeling of that the board respected the fact that we did have these very deep principles. So it's been very successful, the transition, because I totally let her make all the decisions, right?
Right.
But I still do what I continue to do best. So it's been a wonderful transition, and we call it the table for two. That article that came out that was so helpful in convincing the board that such a transition was possible. I just had to comment on that.
Absolutely. Rupert, did you want to comment on that before we go on?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. Also, the question on what is the right length of time to stay in an organization.
Yes,
I
that's
can
from
mirror
Angela.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, I also like the question that Ruth mentioned, who are you without your organization? And then also do you have the other, what is the organization without you? And that was for me also a bit of a trigger, that people came in who said, well, it's about identity. They somehow identified the organization a lot with me. That was for me a trigger that I felt like maybe it's time. And the question if I should be involved in the succession, in the recruitment, well, ask me in 5 years. Of course, at some point, I feared that if this person might be chosen as successor, I wouldn't feel safe. But on the other hand, the board members that choose the successor, I was instrumental in getting them on board. The team, as it is now, I have influenced it. So at present, I'm very confident that it will work. But I don't think there is one recipe, and I don't know. Maybe if I would have left 10 years earlier, it would have been even better for the purpose of the organization. We will never know.
Well, those things, yes, those are the unknown unknowns, aren't they? I wanted to just put a question to any one of you who'd like to answer. Mosharraf Hussain, who's here with us today and is, of course, from Bangladesh. He says, in my culture and in Bangladesh, founders retire when they die. The founder of BRAC, Fazl Hassan Abded, is one of the many cases. The outcome is enormous. It is not the case in the West. Which practice is more beneficial? And then he asks you, Rupert, can you share your views? But I think it would be interesting to know from any of the speakers what their view was. Kat, did you want to give your thought on that?
I think it's interesting that he framed it in a cultural perspective.
Yeah.
Because in this part of the world, people tend to use more of a corporate model, right down to the part about Rupert and the way you described it, that the founder should step out of the way and someone else should do this and whatever. And that, in my culture, even though I live in the West, it doesn't go with the passion and the commitment that Ruth is talking about. And so there's a big change just in the way that organizational leaders are fighting back and trying to redefine what this means for them, rather than putting the corporate template down on top of these kind of organizations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ruth is coming.
Yeah, I was just going to say very quickly on that one. And I think there's also, I mean, the recognition in myself is that I am pretty good at the founding start of being a founder. But for me, there's very different stages. And this is what I've realized, you know, for me, like that galvanizing people and the kind of heat and passion behind an issue, I am great at that. The kind of 10, 15 years more pragmatic down the line, scale, strategic conversations, maybe not quite so good. So for me, I'm recognizing that, you know, the idea of me founding something and staying till the day I die, I imagine I would not be very effective down the line, because my strength is to start things up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that mean you have to leave the organization just because your children are older and they get kicked out of the nest? Do you stop being their parent? You know, I love my 50-year-old baby daughter. I love the fact that we could sit down for the first time and she can tell me about her life and I can tell her about mine, and we could see where the paths cross and whatever. You know, I don't think you have to stop being who you are. Your role may change, but do you get kicked out of the nest as well as the child?
It can happen.
I would like to contradict a bit, because I brought also the analogy with the family, but I think there is a borderline, or there's a line, because it's not my business and it's not my family. There's a lot of my emotion in, and a lot of my empathy and my everything. So there are elements of this family feeling, but it shouldn't be the same, because I really believe that we need a strong civil society, which is stronger than founders and individuals. And I would like to echo what Ruth said: for different stages of any organization, it needs different kind of people. What I was always had the intention to emerge, to develop myself in order to still be suitable to lead this organization. But of course, there are some limits. Yeah. And also answering the question from Musharraf about what is, I think it depends also on the organization and on the leader. And the challenge is, I think you have to assess rationally and emotionally every few years, are you still the right leader? And that's definitely the Anglo-Saxon civil society is more developed there. It needs also formal structures to make sure that you don't stay till you die, despite you're not the right person. That doesn't mean that sometimes it may be the right thing to stay till then.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me call Vijaya. Vijaya, you had a question or a comment.
Yes, first of all, thank you to all the speakers. I've learned so much and gained so much today.
Absolutely.
I myself had set up it was a business, a personal business myself, called Art You Make, but it was really kind of inspired by my daughter, who's an artist, who has now a long-term health condition. And to help promote her, but also my longing to help young people from a very, because I used to run a shop, a newsagent shop for 25 years. I ran it, and I used to see the kids grow up and how they were coerced into crime and all those related things that change a person. And so I really wanted to help young people and understand them. So basically I was trying to, I had all these ideas in my head to bring the business and community together. And I set up Art You Make, and that was my intention, to create a platform and whatever. And this business idea I set up in 2011. But obviously it was just the starting. I had no money, I had no funding, and I just saw it as a social enterprise to get people involved. And so I wasn't able to continue with it, although I said I haven't even got a web page or anything. And the business name is still there, but I haven't been able to fulfill its full potential of what it could be. Yet throughout all my other vocations and what I am now, my ideas have kind of progressed in those areas that I'd hoped to bring about these things. And those projects are kind of developing already in the various communities, because I've been involved in community engagement and all the other things. And so my ideas have been taken forth in various ways, and it's been realized, but under the umbrella of the principles that I kind of set up, as it were.
I understand.
Yeah, so I'm really like curious of how I would go about, because I don't want the responsibility. I see it being fruitful, although it's not really in the capacity that it could be and it should be. And I would really like someone to take it on. It's
There we are.
I don't know the answer to that, but I was just curious as to how to get something like that off the ground, but not be a part of it, if you see what I mean.
I do. Well, maybe Ruth in her spare time could do that for you. Thank you, Vijaya, for sharing that. I think a lot of people come to that kind of situation where they have either started or have made a social contribution of one kind or another, and then get to a point where perhaps they don't want to take it any further. Let me come to, thank you very much, Vijaya. Let me come to Sarah. You had a point to make here, which I could read out, but why don't you quickly, as it were, read it to us. Up to you, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Welcome.
Hi. I mean, I suppose I'll read it out because, yeah. So, is that okay?
Either way. Yeah.
I know. So as an elder and founder, as well as a passionate ED of a small but relatively impactful and to date all volunteer nonprofit, I think there may be a different trajectory for our succession than for that of larger, more professional organizations. My board and I are trying to develop into an organization with a paid deputy director. We actually have some grant funding for it, but it's been really challenging to find someone with a similar passion and commitment. And one of the something I didn't put in the note is one of the issues is we do have the grant funding for a part-time person, so without benefits, which is a terribly difficult kind of position to be in, because we don't want to take away the funding from our direct programming. And I work on Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is energy access in off-grid sub-Saharan Africa. And primarily we're doing the fundraising and helping our 10 partners in 3 countries do the programming. So it's really, we're building a lot of capacity in country and only sourcing materials in country, but it's just, and we really don't want to see this disappear, but I'm perfectly happy to be swallowed by a larger company or larger organization. We're not interested in empire building either. So there's that difficult balance between, the board who wants to grow and become, massively scaled up, and my founder perspective of just being focused on the actual impact and work in the communities in need.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for that. We've got an offer from Vijaya to take her organization over in one way, or her concept, and now here you are offering a merger. That's great. And of course, I was being witty, but in fact, those are different ways, of course, in which organizations proceed forward. It's absolutely right. I'm going to invite Mel to now do a little summary for us and to bring us to the end of this particular program. I've thoroughly enjoyed facilitating our 3 speakers, It's been a real privilege for me to work with you, Rupert, and you, Kat, and you, Ruth. Thank you so much for permitting me to do that. There are one or two very important remarks in the chat which I would recommend people to look at as we pass over to Mel. For example, comments from Molly and also from Douglas. And it's been really lovely to have you with us, Douglas, even if you can't come on today. So over to you, Mel, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. And as ever, I will repeat myself from previous webinars. For those of you who have been on previous ones, you'll know what I'm going to say. It's almost impossible to kind of summarize everything that was said today, because the conversation is so rich and diverse, and there were so many different ideas.
Absolutely.
I mean, thank you so much to the three speakers. I think what you've shared and the insights are just invaluable as ever. And of course, incredibly topical. I mean, where else would you find that Rupert today, its very moment almost, is kind of that is born on. And Ruth is joining her new organization tomorrow. And then Kathryn really is very recently kind of changed what her role is. So really, really topical and relevant in terms of what's happening. All three gave different insights into where they were at, and these are incredibly valuable. I think it was interesting what Rupert said, for example, where he said his intention was to let go and not to pass on, which I think is a very interesting idea. Basically, his view, as I was taking from that, was that the organization was ready and mature and ready, and had taken on everything that he had anyway, so there was nothing left, if you like, to pass on, and the organization was mature and could move on. And then he said later, in answer to one of the questions about how the real contribution was to civil society, towards a society, a fair and inclusive society, and that's what his contribution was. We'll yet to see how it goes with successor, I guess, Rupert, whether that can maybe come back in a year, and we'll see how it goes. But I think it was a fantastic insight. Then we had Kathryn, of course, Kat, in terms of her basically what I was taking from it was really what she believed in was really in her DNA. It come from the civil rights movement. It was part of what she was doing. And as a leader of the organization, she'd founded and grown it, and those values were in it. And then they were being handed on. And, she was so proud to be kind of known as the mother of all mothers, I think she said. What one proud mama, Kat, which I just think is a brilliant expression. So to be so proud of what it was happening within the organization as it develops and grows. And then for young people to understand the culture of the organization, but also to be flexible, to move on as times move on, but to understand this key values, but move on and develop and be part of that, I guess, essential DNA, which is all related to civil rights and fairness. And then Ruth's story, it was I Can See Clearly Now by Jimmy Cliff. That was the one. So we hopefully all should be seeing clearly. But your story, and thanks for sharing it, because you mentioned a number of times how painful it was and how difficult it was, and I think that honesty, a lot of us on the call would feel, because it is difficult. It has been painful for a lot of us, and getting an understanding about what doesn't work as much as what does work, I guess, is part of what we're all about with the elders. And you can learn for some things that didn't work, and the things that weren't working for you and why they weren't working, etc. I think is incredibly valuable. And you were sharing as well, which I think is true for a lot of us to kind of learn from, is that some of us are starters. That's what we do. We start things, and we're not necessarily the same person who's going to continue the organization, to develop the organization as it grows. We may get a bit bored with it, or it's just not our forte, and it needs to be handed on earlier on. And then we had the discussion, which I think was Musarraf's question started really, which was about, okay, what does this really mean, and where are we at culturally? And I remember some years back actually talking with Fazal Abed from BRAC, when he was talking about the difference in culture in Bangladesh and how he was handing his organization on to his family after he died, and people in the West were going, "What? Hand it on to your family? You can't do that." And having a discussion and an understanding about how things progress and so on in different cultures was really, really interesting. So again, as I say, it's impossible for me to really sum this up properly, given the amount of rich content that we had and great questions and discussions. I think we've all learned a lot today. Certainly, that's the view in the chat. We need to keep it connecting, keep sharing, sign up to our news updates, as I said earlier. Our next webinar is on the 13th of June, where we'll have some good speakers, which is called Living to Work or Working to Live. Another one of our kind of provocative titles, but I'm sure we know we'll have some really interesting speakers on that. Slight change to the time. Normally we have it 4 p.m. UK time, but next time in June it will be 2 p.m. UK time, but we'll keep you in touch about that. We've got another event or webinar coming up at Catalyzing Change Week, part of Catalyst 2030 network. And Caitlin's just put information about that on in the chat. So please join if you want. Remember to let us know. This is recorded and we're going to put it up on YouTube. Any of you got any problems with that? Let us know as soon as possible, please. And I would just like to kind of finish once again to thank everybody for joining, thanking everybody for their contributions. Thank you so much for the speakers. So thank you for being so candid, so right on message in terms of what this issue is for all of us, and that we're learning, working together and moving on in a much better way, much more considered way. We're all incredibly grateful. Great to see you all, and hopefully we'll see you again in June, if not before. Good luck in your journeys, and in particular, those who are starting on the new journeys today or tomorrow. Good luck with everything. And thanks, of course, as ever, to Chris. Thank you, Chris. Bye just now.
All the best, and thank you. Lovely to see you all. Take care, Agnes. Take care. And thank you so much. Take care, Maria and Arlette. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Rupert.
Thanks for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Really good.